So here we are in Capture One, and there's absolutely no surprises here, but I will run you through it. And one thing that's kind of curious in this as well is seeing how the light tonality changes when we go from earlier, which you see in the front one, then into the really low reeking light qualities, which we have in here, and then into the evening, which we get to all the way towards the end, where things get into the blue color palette and the bluer tones. So you can see some of that right in here. So we're going to scroll through that. Before we start though, I want to just show you in our settings, there's absolutely nothing done to this, but for a little bit of sharpening right here. There's no color settings, no treatments. Here, 5500 Kelvin and a tiny bit of tint that will not even be noticeable, to be honest. So here we have a true capture 5500 Kelvin neutral color capture. So what you see in changes, what you see in color on the screen is nothing but the tones that's inherent in the landscape and also inherent in the light that casts on it. So a lot of these are shot in panels. So when you see this frame, it's really meant to be one long horizontal like this. And I did this to get closer, get more detail, and I really was intrigued by these mountains, so that's why I shot these with a slightly longer lens and chose to stitch them together. So again, no surprises to this. I'll just show you a few of these stitches as we go down, and you can see that the light quality changes. I like these mountains in here, and it was something like this that I ended up using, with the light coming in, reeking through this and shaping this and creating volume between especially here and the ones behind. So I'm just going to scroll down and I'll show you where I ended up for the light that I liked. Now you see my capture here is skipping a little bit between frames. This is the second camera that I had that I ended up shooting some background plates with that had a longer lens so I could get closer to the mountains. So I apologize for the skipping between here a tiny bit. So the light qualities I'm looking for is quite subtle. I'm going to pull up maybe this panel right here. This is really quite close to where I want it to be. When the sun hits the horizon or comes behind a mountain, there's a moment there where you only see half of the sun, right? The sun is halfway behind the mountain that sits up on the horizon line. And in that moment, you get a few seconds of light or a few minutes where the light gets just really soft and really diffused. So you can see the difference right here. This is when the sun is full on right above the mountain. And then just as it tips halfway in between, you get this light quality. And you can see how much softer this is compared to these two. Let me pull this down so you can see this better. I think you get the idea, but I just want to show it to you. And I'll give you the reason for me, only if this would grab properly. There we go. So this is full on sun coming across the landscape. This is just seconds later, or maybe a minute or two, where you have almost the same length of the shadows, but a very different softness to the light. Everything just gets diffused. You get half of the intensity. It's almost putting a neutral density filter right over the sun because you only get half of the rays that's hitting the landscape. So right in here is where I chose to build my landscape. You can ask what the difference is, and it's really just in the contrast levels, but it adds again that really seductive, for me seductive, painterly palette. So if you are to do something similar to this, just again observe the light, see how it changes. It goes from this right here, which is really soft, and then a few minutes earlier, which is way more contrasty. Right there, you can see the difference quite well. From here, the light just traveled completely into shadow pretty much. You have these frames here, and then it went into night. And we talked about this in the previous chapter with the open vista, where we get into this blue tone. And you can see how this kind of gets similar to what we captured, but for the green grass here, or the yellowish tones in the grass, and the red rocks, the mountains are very similar, and that will be because the locations are just minutes away from each other. So that's my rundown in Capture One for the background plate. I'm just going to quickly bring up the talent as well. And there's no secrets here either, really. The only thing is that I shot a lot of pictures earlier on. I was really intrigued by this guy. He was just so much fun. He had such presence and such character. So I spent a good hour prior to the sun being low enough for us to shoot to just have fun and explore just beautiful, fun pictures of this guy being on the cart. So there's a few of these captures in here. And then we're going to come into the frame, so we started working on what we needed for the composite piece. So again, on location, as you saw in the previous chapters, my thoughts were well documented. So I'm not sure if I should add too much to this. Here you see it really in effect. We have our white backdrop, which is only added so that it would be easier for me to cut out hair and the hair in here. Makes for a simpler composite. And I'm zooming in a little bit on them to try to match the length of the lens, 63mm here, which is similar to what I had when I shot the landscape. So that's really the essence of this. There was, just about shooting a lot of different exposures so that we had a lot of stuff to work with. There's flying hair, there's flying dresses, and I really explored this shooting 1041 images just in this session. So here's some wider ones. So I just kind of explored making sure that I had the pieces that I needed. So I've selected those for us, and we're gonna take them into Photoshop and put them all together. As I mentioned in the introduction, this is a fairly easy composite.